Okay, if everybody wants to grab a drink and then come on over, we'll make a start. See a lot of people with empty hands. Please do make sure you are hydrated. Okay, guys, at the back, if you want to come and take a seat, feel free to come and populate these front rows. We don't bite. Okay. Oh, that was very abrupt. Like, we're starting. Okay, welcome everybody to Tech Wednesday. I haven't picked up the clicker, so I'm going to pick that straight up. Very, very warm welcome to those of you who have made the effort to come this evening. When Luke and I came up with the Tech Wednesday Geovation Takeover, we were a bit worried with it being half term, but it's great that there's so many of you, so thank you ever so much for making the effort. I'm just going to quickly run through. So Tech Wednesday is every single month, the third Wednesday, and we meet here in iCentrum. And it's a chance for entrepreneurs from the region and afar to come and collaborate with each other and to hear some really great, awesome ideas from the companies that are going to be up here this evening presenting to you. Please do, throughout the evening, tweet away. So obviously we want the conversation in the room to be buzzing, but we also want the online conversation to be happening. So the people who haven't been able to make it still know what's going on and we're shouting about it. So please do use the @Geovation, @InnoBham, @Tech Wednesday, all the @. There's more coming at you in a minute from the presenters, but that hashtag #TechWeds, obviously we'll keep that all nice and tight so we can keep that conversation going. When you came in, the lovely Katie would have registered you and you would have created your name badge. For those of you here for the first time, you would have been like, what the hell? All these dots thrown at you. So these dots are a way for, at the end when we're networking, just for you guys to kind of see who else is in the room, to see who's here for the same reason. If you've got the same coloured dots, you've already got something in common, so why don't you start a conversation about it? And also for those people who are, looking for opportunities, look out for the people with the orange dot because they're hiring, they're the people that you want to talk to, and vice versa. So please do make the most of that. Anybody with a gold star this evening? I mean, don't be ashamed about it. You've got a gold star. Very, very warm welcome to you guys. So these are the guys who are here for the very first time, and it's really awesome that they've joined us this evening. Our Tech Wednesday is forever growing, and I think we're at something like 2,500 people now, so it's really, really great. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. We've got 4 talks for you this evening. So as I mentioned, Geovation are doing the takeover, so it makes my job really easy for the evening because I can just sit back and relax. So we've got some great companies who have travelled all the way down to Birmingham to come and speak to you this evening. So please do make them feel welcome. I'm going to not go into it too much because Luke from Geovation is going to talk to you about what they do. But it's a really great partnership that we have with these guys. We've been working with them for a couple of years now, delivering workshops, and he's going to talk more about the partnership that we have and how you guys can kind of get in on that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand straight over to Luke. So Luke, everybody.
Thanks again, and I'd like to, sort of bounce that thanks right back to Innovation Birmingham. Yes, we've had a really good relationship with them for a couple of years now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more now about Geovation. First and foremost, introduce myself. My name's Luke Hampson. I work as the Partnership and Outreach Manager for Geovation. I'm here tonight with a couple of my colleagues. There's Paul Nebel, who's he's our senior engineer, and our software engineer at the back there, Andreas. So I just thought it was an interesting slide because I'm approaching 40, I'm in my late 30s now, and I'm starting to listen to Radio 4 a whole lot more. So on that note, I was listening to this program the other day about 50 innovations that kind of, have changed the modern economy. And basically the point of that slide was that government departments and kind of government-owned companies as ordnance surveyors, because Geovation is an ordnance survey initiative, it's not really a new thing for government departments to throw money at sort of, trying to stimulate innovation. This was done back in 1795 by the French government. At the time, they were trying to feed their troops with a more sort of varied diet. And so they threw this challenge out there. How can we do that? How can we feed our troops with a more varied diet? And they wanted to get away from bureaucracy, essentially. So throwing that out to the market to develop that, and this chap invented the tinned can, and from there, this kind of methodology, I guess, of trying to accelerate businesses to sort of address sort of grand challenges was born, I guess, one of the first examples. So that's kind of what we do at Geovation. There's a background slide here from how OS kind of have formed over the years and the kind of innovative things we've done over the years. So we're 228 years old as a company, so we've been around a while. Geovation is actually 10 years old this year, and we launched around the sort of time we released a whole bunch of open data. And 5 years ago or so, Geovation opened our Geovation Hub in London, and that's a co-working space where we run a couple of accelerators from accelerator programs. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that in the following slides. But one of our partner hubs is Innovation Birmingham, and we've got a few of those around the country. One in Manchester, we've got something happening in Edinburgh with our Geovation Scotland, we've got something in Cardiff, and one in Bristol too. So we're all about trying to, feed the funnel. We're looking for we support early stage startups rather than kind of scaling companies up. We do support SMEs and work with SMEs and larger organizations, but in a slightly different way. But it's about basically, if you have an idea that's using geography or property data in some shape or form, then we're really interested in sort of connecting with you. Joining up as a community member, you'll receive newsletters from us, you'll connect with us on our Slack channel, and be able to sort of take use of some other benefits, including, some hot desking space at these partner hubs, such as Innovation Birmingham. So a few stats for you here. Just, over the 10 years that we've been running stuff, we have backed 111 companies, and there's still 77% of those companies are still around and active. It's just above kind of, the norm, I guess. Those companies have gone on to raise an extra £61 million in funding, which is an impressive stat. And, we've created, as a direct result of our efforts, 438 high-value jobs. We like to say that everything happens somewhere, so geography kind of touches everything we do on a daily basis. So it's hard to think of any problem or solution or idea that isn't touched by geography in some way. So, the 10 plus market sectors that we have as in our portfolio of companies that we support. They're really, really broad. And you'll see that tonight from the 4 companies that we've got. And the community membership keeps growing. We've got 1,600 plus now, and we'll hopefully, we'd like more people to sort of join on board there, because, the ecosystem is key in supporting everyone that's part of that. That slide is basically the fact that Geovation's, I guess, our brand values have always been sort of rooted in sustainability and doing more with less. It's not that we wouldn't back companies that are all about just making profit, but we always have a bit of an interest on backing companies that are loosely based around these sustainable development goals. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, I think there are 17 in total. It's the nearest thing we've got to a framework of kind of, sort of sustainable, doing things more sustainably. And we like to sort of, with those sort of broad categories, hook a lot of our activity around that, and we back companies that are addressing those. Not exclusively, but a lot of the time. So I just want to plug a couple of things here. Yeah, we've got our own hub in London, and obviously our partner hub here in Birmingham, but it's really the accelerator program that I wanted to sort of raise awareness about, because this is a really neat opportunity for any early stage startup, because it's fully funded. We give away a £20,000 grant to companies that come on board. That's money you can spend how you wish. We also give you some residency, some desk space at our hub in London, and also really, really intensive support from our technical team and our business team as well. So it's a really neat package. And Geovation wouldn't be what it is really without kind of the power of our partnerships that we've got. It's in association with HMLR because of our PropTech Accelerator. We've just recently launched the accelerator in Geovation Scotland with the Registers of Scotland. And the Benchmark initiative is actually through a foundation called a Midjar Foundation, which is has backing from Google. And that's all about data ethics, specifically the ethical use of location data. So, and a whole bunch of kind of companies in the middle rank there. Some are paying us some money to get involved, some are more in-kind benefits. And at the bottom here, I've got our partnership hubs as well. Okay, so there's just a really quick slide showing the partner hubs that we have. If you're of interest, please just visit us on geovation.uk and we can tell you more about that. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first company tonight, and that's Ravi from Property Markets. Ravi's idea is all about democratizing the property search market, and it's been described as the money supermarket of property search. So without further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Cheers. Oh, I got the right way? Yeah. That's me, just in case, yeah. It's massive. I actually look a lot better than that. So I'm Ravi Tulsiani, the CEO of Property Markets, the money supermarket of property search. Thanks for coming out to listen to me. So just to give you a background of who I am and my story, I came from a business analyst background, working in an investment bank, working with numbers, analyzing data, that kind of fun thing to do every day. And I actually saved up some money. And then I looked at where I was going to do with that money. And there was no point putting it in the bank because you get no returns. So I looked at the property market to get something back. And I soon realized the tools available were just not sufficient to look for an investment. I didn't want to go into the auction market because it's hard to figure out if you can get a mortgage or not for a property. So I was looking at Zoopla and Rightmove, and the amount of work you have to do was ridiculous. You have to go and figure out an area, see if it's actually going to be good, if it's, and then look at the properties, compare it to the area average, figure out if you're getting a good deal or not in terms of an investment basis. Now, all this was very tiresome, going into each individual property and figuring out price per square foot, comparing it to the area average, taking out EPC data, taking land registry data, compiling it all in one place and comparing it. Now, although I liked doing it as a business analyst and I love data, it was very, very frustrating. And I realized the data was available, it just wasn't all being displayed in the best way for my purpose. So I realized there was an opportunity here. So the property search market, as I see it, is ripe for disruption. Reason being, is comparative metrics are not being used. Things like price per square foot, yield, and historical prices paid are not readily available as search criteria in the current search portals. So this is how the current property market works. You have a seller who instructs an estate agent and pays him money for his services. The estate agent then puts the property up on one of the search portals and again has to pay for those services. And then the search portal finally displays it to a buyer. The problem is there's no one looking out for the buyer. No information is there, or no search portals are there to actually help the buyer make a decision until now. So if you were to do this manually, you're looking at sort of 50 hours of manual hard labor, collecting, comparing all the data that I had to do before. So we're looking at doing this instantly. And we do this simply by, first, enter a location that you want to buy a property in, and up pops a map, color-coded, with green pins cheaper than the area average, and red pins more expensive than the area average. Then when you click on one of the pins, it tells you the price per square foot of the property, the price per square foot of the area, and the difference between the two. We also show you the 4-year street sold average price per square foot, and our new tool also tells you if the property's been decreased in decreased in price. So you can press a button on our map and it will tell you instantly all the properties that have been decreased in price. So we're using technology to disrupt the market. Society is moving towards a trend of transparency and data-driven decisions, but they don't expect to pay for this information, and most people don't really trust estate agents because they tend to have an agenda. And this is the technology that we're using. So we have React in the front end, a MySQL database in the back end, and we're feeding information to our database from Zoopla and CSV data coming in from Land Registry and EPC. So our user journey is quite simple. People come to our website after hearing about us from an advert, either Google or Facebook. They come to the homepage, we give them a description of what we do and the benefits that we can bring, and then they move on to the map page. On the map page, they then use the website and they get 10 free tries, and then they're asked to register. Registration's free, and we look to monetize that in the coming months, actually. My cohort graph here has been absolutely annihilated, but what it tells you is, this is showing you that the more light blue in the graph shows you how, as time's gone on, from version 0 to version 21, so the people using the website has increased, as we've used the lean methodology approach, where we build, measure, learn, take the information from that build, and then we employ it into the next build, the next iteration. So you can see usability has increased from, this is supposed to be 40%, all the way up to 70% now. So usability has increased 70%, and this little green part of the graph shows you that the registrations have increased from around 0.75% all the way up to about 10% now. So we've validated our idea that people like what we're doing, and it propels us forward. So the business model, we offer our data services for free. People come to us to validate their purchases, and then we're monetizing this traffic in 6 different ways. Currently, we're looking at lead generation, which I'll go on to a bit later, but we're looking to move on database details sales, which will be selling off-market properties, people who can't sell online because they're selling under market value, or they're distress sales, people who are doing banks, repossessions, and things like that. And we're also looking at doing a community zone, somewhere where people can upload their properties and we can benefit from our user group and our database to do peer-to-peer lending. Now, this is a place that's actually growing in the market right now, and you can look to get around between 6 and 12% from your money. So again, interesting for our user group. So our broker leads campaign, as it works currently, this is the current monetization route that we're doing. People come to the website and we tell them about the great deals that we have and the properties on sale and the analysis that we're doing, and we ask them if they're interested in a broker quote. Here, they sign up for a broker quote either on the homepage or on registration, and then we pass that information on to our affiliate partners. Now, our affiliate partners are anything from small mortgage brokers who, one-man bands, independent organizations who need leads, all the way up to the biggest mortgage broker in the country right now, Alexander Hall, who's the mortgage broker arm of Foxtons. And we work on a success basis fee. So we get paid based on actually a mortgage broker completing, on mortgage completing. But we're looking at doing an API route as well, whereby any mortgage that comes in will be sent directly to a centralized market where thousands of mortgage brokers can bid for that. And we get paid for that in cash upfront within 2 weeks, as opposed to waiting for a house to complete. Difference being the API is a lot smaller based compared to the affiliate program. So we used our build, measure, learn technique to decrease the registration costs, which used to be around £56, now £1.30. And the same thing said with the cost of leads, which used to be £14, now roughly at about £2 per lead. So the market's pretty big, I'd say huge. More than 1.2 million properties sold every year, 800,000 mortgages a year, and over 2 billion spent on digital advertising by our market segment. Again, my slide's been butchered. But we envisaged the market, just for broker leads, to be worth about 60 million. We're looking to take about 10% of that, so around 6 million per year. So there are no current market competitors doing exactly what we're doing. There are people offering either a small amount of information on a large number of properties or a large amount of information on a small number of properties, which is why we've positioned ourselves right here, which is a large amount of information on a large number of properties for sale. So this is our journey so far. We've come up with the idea, we've created the prototype, we've proved the prototype, we've validated that idea, and we're now looking to monetize. And once we start monetizing, we're going to start to aggressively grow and grow in different types of monetization routes as well. So this is the team. We've got sales, programming, design, property development, and property letting in our expertise. And we're looking for investment to aggressively grow. But at the same time, what we're really looking for as well is technical expertise to increase our momentum. So our build, measure, learn loop can go even faster, and our momentum can be even better, giving us even more success. So I'm Ravi Tulsiani. I am the CEO of Property Markets, the money supermarket of property search. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all right.
Okay, folks. Thanks, Ravi. We're going to take questions now. So any questions out there for Ravi? At the back there. Is there a roaming mic at all? Oh, there, it's on its way now.
Thank you. So you're doing it on the sales of properties. Is there anything for the rental market as well, sorry?
We're working on sales first. My developer, my partner and CTO, was actually very keen on working on the rental stuff, and he created a rental platform based on time to work, so how long it would take from each property that was for rent to get to work. But we'll look at doing that once we've further down the line on what we're doing at the moment. We don't want to, disperse ourselves too much.
One more at the back there.
Hello, Ravi.
Hi.
Hello, mate. It looks like a lot of development that's gone into that. It must be. Is there a lot of development, or would you say?
Yeah, you can have a look. Everyone can look at the website now if you want. It's www.property-markets.com, and you can see that it's working on mobile phones. A young gentleman, the man over here, has just said he's on there right now. But yeah, fair amount. We've been working on it for a while, and we've just started monetizing recently. So
yeah, how long has it taken you to get to this stage then?
So we'd worked on it for probably about a year on and off, year and a half on and off, before we joined Geovation about 6 months ago. And since joining Geovation, we've accelerated what we've been doing because it's given us the strategic tools to use to figure out what decisions to make and when to make them. So the last 6 months have been a real massive improvement with Geovation.
It's interesting.
Thank you.
Have you thought about other markets as well?
Yeah, I mean, we are thinking, in terms of markets, are you talking about monetization routes or like other areas?
Just implementing this model somewhere else, like the car market, for instance, is that?
We haven't taken it that far as yet, no. We want to sort of get this to work first, and then we can sort of maybe look at other markets.
Okay. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
one more in the middle here. I can give you my
Might be
mic.
quicker, yeah.
You're very reliant on data from external providers. Have you had challenges both about the quality of that data and actually aligning the data sets so they all match
Yeah.
up with each other?
So not every property for sale will have information on its price per square foot. So they won't have accurate or won't have any information on the actual floor plans. We're looking to mitigate this in the future by working with the government to make something a bit more robust and say that floor plans should be included with any sale. But using things like EPC data, we've managed to get the historical stuff. But it's the best of a bad world. You either get no data or you have some cleaning to do on the data. So it's not ideal at the moment. But I think we're moving as time goes on, so the data will get better and better. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. Thanks again, Ravi.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I was just saying, there's some folk at the back of the room. There are some seats at the front here if you wish to come and have a seat. So, next up we have Paddy. Hi, Paddy. Paddy works for Atmo. They're a company who are addressing air quality monitoring for heavy industry. They're helping site managers develop a deeper understanding of the environment that they operate in. So, over to you.
Okay, can you hear me? I can hear me. That's good. Yeah, so I'm Paddy. I'm here to talk about Atmo today. It's our company. So the team is Guy and myself. So Guy, the CEO, is just sat in the corner there. Both of us Bath graduates. So yeah, I'm not sure if you've been to Bath, but lovely place. Definitely recommend it. Skipped a few there. Okay, so a bit about the area we work in then. So we are air quality through and through. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of news recently about air quality, growing problem in many areas. So we are very focused on industry, so the industrial problems they have. So that can largely be broken into two areas. So you have the environmental side, so that's pollution from sites that leaves a site, and you have to monitor that. And there's also the implications for the staff on that site as well. So we have those two areas we focus on. So for some companies, that's the same person you talk to. Sometimes the environmental manager and the health and safety manager is the same person. Sometimes it's different. So we have to adapt to the company. So on the health and safety side, health and safety statistics, 44,000 absences per year due to that's just lung-related illnesses. And an absence will, on average, cost an employer £1,500. And that's just the cost to the... Is it still on? Yeah. That's just the cost to the employer. So there's also costs associated with the individual, and the government also fronts some of that cost as well. So from the environmental side, these companies have to have environmental permits, which are issued by the Environment Agency. And as legislation gets more strict, and more companies are having to have these permits. There's a bit of legislation coming in soon called MCPD, which is Medium Combustible Plant Directive. So any site which has diesel generators or generators around sort of below 100 megawatts, they have to monitor emissions from that. So there's a lot of sites might not necessarily have permits now, they will have. So at the minute, the focus for industry is largely on complying to regulations. So it's a bit of a tick box exercise. So we come in and we really want to show them more data that they can actually use to solve the problem, because a tick box doesn't necessarily give you the information you need to solve the problem. Okay, so the sort of places we work, basically anywhere where there's particulates, possible gases. So vehicle depots, you can have obviously vehicle emissions if you've got a fleet of vehicles you look after. And these are actually places that we do work on. So the two on the left here, Redcar Bulk Terminal, Middlesbrough. So these are sites which have, any one time hundreds of thousands of tons of material on site. And if there's adverse weather, if there's wind, that can easily find its way off site, and they have to do something about that, and prove that they're doing something about that. And then the indoor sites, obviously, if you have a lot of stuff moving around, then that can cause dust to accumulate and cause lots of things to accumulate unless you have enough ventilation. And another area we're looking to move into is offices as well, smart buildings. Okay, so in terms of what's out there currently, normally if you're a health and safety manager and you want to prove compliance, you would give a member of staff a sampling pump. So this is something which clips onto their belt, they wear it for a day, and it basically pulls air through a filter for their shift. And at the end of the day, you'll send that sample off to a lab to get analysed. So obviously, it can tell you whether you're compliant, but at the end of the day, you're just getting one piece of data for one day. You don't know if you measured on the right day. The day after that, you might have a big delivery coming in, and that might be a lot worse. So it doesn't give you any real spatial or temporal resolution in that data. And then for the environmental side, you typically have boundary monitors. So these are bits of kit which are remotely deployed on sites. And typically, the Environment Agency requires some degree of certification for these, so they have to be calibrated against a laboratory standard equipment. So this is MCerts. And that can make them, because they have to go through all this rigorous testing, this can make them prohibitively expensive, especially if you're a small, medium site, you might not be able to have more than one of these deployed. And if you're a big site, then just having one is not going to tell you all the information if you've got a big site. So those are the two existing methods. So how we approach the problem is we're using LPWAN sensors. So for those who don't know, this is low power wide area network sensors. And this covers technologies such as LoRaWAN, NOcean. So these are quite relatively new technologies, but they have a lot of benefits over existing tech. So you can obviously deploy a wide range of sensors, not just pollution sensors, and you can also collect contextual data about a site, how a site is running, which can be really useful, and we'll get a bit more into that later on. And also, we're coupling that with cloud-based software, so our current system uses Google Cloud, and that basically provides us a platform to get all our data in, do all the analysis we need, and display that to clients as well. Okay, so going back a bit, a little bit back to how we got to this point. It's a bit of an interesting story. So basically, as I said, Guy and I graduated from Bath, and sort of in that time, we didn't really know each other, started doing our own thing. So on the left here, this was Guy's project at the end of university. So he helped set up a Formula Student project at Bath, which is still, to this day, the #1 electric Formula Student project. Yeah, you really wanted me to say that. But yeah, it's still going, so that was his baby. While he was doing this, I graduated and went on to do some freelancing, so set up my own consultancy, did some projects with university, some on my own. So basically just did a load of fun projects, which were great, because I'm an engineer and that's the sort of thing I like to do. So there's one there, that's a 6-axis drone controller, so that's kind of like a 6-axis mouse to fly a drone, and that's a spectrophotometer. So yeah, so as you can see, quite a different set of skills that we had. So Guy was very much into starting projects and running things, and I was more into just sort of building things and getting things working. So we thought these skills could potentially work well together. So we met each other around 2015. Then we started work on our first startup. So it's called Food Cube. This is basically we bought a fleet of electric trikes, and we bought them just the chassis, and then we added the electric motor onto them after. And we also put some cool LEDs, as you can see up there. And our idea was basically, to start off with, it was basically city centre logistics, so a green alternative to vans and stuff in cities. So we got some DFT grant money to proceed with that. And then as we sort of got into it, we sort of realised, well, maybe this could work as a sort of Deliveroo for business kind of thing. So we started bringing big deliveries of sort of sandwiches and stuff to offices. And that was all great and everything, but we did sort of start to realise the B2C model wasn't really playing to our strengths, and Definitely, like, we feel our strengths were more in sort of approaching clients and speaking to them about their problems one-to-one. So we sort of pivoted quite strongly to air quality. So throughout the course, while we had these trikes, we decided to just put sensors in them and decide, maybe we can get a bit more interesting data from having sensors in the vehicles. So we put sort of temperature sensors in them, and one of them happened to be an air quality sensor as well. So we basically ended up playing with air quality sensors, and then that seemed to be a lot more interesting to people, to have air quality sensors moving around in cities. So this is how we got into Atmo, basically. So luckily, through our previous contacts, we managed to get a few monitoring jobs under our belts. And here's just a show of some of our first sensors. So this was the first indoor one. It was 3D printed. And moving on to like a more ruggedized version there. And then one of our latest ones, top right there, that's using a LoRaWAN transceiver and an actual custom-made PCB as well. But yeah, the one thing we learned throughout all of that was hardware is hard. It's, unless you're kitted out to do it, it can really eat a lot of your time. And that sort of leads us to where we are now, which is we're becoming more data-focused, definitely. So we're lucky enough to have worked with quite a range of clients, so a lot of Bristol companies, and RBT, like I said, Middlesbrough. And we also offer this dashboard as well. So this is the real value in what we do, is the data, and the fact that we can give clients access, to stuff that they didn't know was happening. And this is the thing that we show people, and it's really exciting to them because they can see something that they haven't seen before, really. So a bit of a rundown of one of our projects that we've done. So the RBT, as I was saying, this is an aerial view of the site. So you can just about see the road surrounding the site. And in the middle, you've got the sort of deposits of whatever material they've got on site. So coal, lots of stuff, basically. So we basically had sensors on this site for a year, collecting data. And we also then collected other sources of data from them. So shipping data, wind data. And we basically turned all this together into an algorithm and started finding relationships between, how does the wind affect what the pollution does, and what type of material tends to lead to the most pollution. And we basically summarized this in a report for them. And because of the findings in that report, they're now really keen for us to start monitoring more alongside pollution. So they want us to basically set up sensors so they can start working out causality. So how can we relate this bit of activity to this pollution spike, essentially? So that's the direction we're moving now. So in terms of where we want to end up, we want to be able to give actionable insights to health and safety managers or environmental managers. So if that basically means collecting a load of this contextual data along with the pollution data, combining it, and then using that to feed predictions. So, for example, it might look something like this. So if we know how deliveries, how vehicle repairs, tests, that kind of thing affects pollution, then we can start predicting it, and we can say to the health and safety manager, look, what your schedule is this week, feed those figures into this, and it will tell you what you can expect. So it's about giving them that extra tool to predict and make changes if they need to. And then there's also the other element of we can actually start seeing how that exposure affects staff as well, because obviously that's ultimately who is affected most, is the staff, the people on the ground. So if we can start linking all these predictions and these trends to staff, then that also gives them a huge benefit. So in terms of where we're looking to take it now, so obviously we want to integrate more data, we want to get that causality, we want to know what's causing the pollution spikes and how we can stop them. In order to do that, we just have to collect more and more data, so more sensors. We're really keen to partner in more industries and also potentially work with universities in a KTP as well. We're already having discussions with UE. And also, we want to be part of the conversation and engage with Health and Safety Executive, Environment Agency, because we feel that some of their tactics, some of their methods in terms of sampling are a bit antiquated, a bit old school, and I think they could use some updating. And if we're part of that conversation, then I think we're more likely to be part going on. And yeah, we just want to grow the team as well. So we want obviously more. We need data scientists. Really, we need people to help us understand the data. So that'd be really valuable to us. We have worked with interns in the past, but yeah, we just need more people really to go through the data. Yeah, so that's everything. That's my email. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paddy. Any questions? Again from the back.
Hello, Paddy. You're right there.
Hi.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Being, I think about air myself. Just the quality of air. You can drive into Birmingham, and you feel the change. When you drive in and out. Have you looked at not just waste facilities and manufacturing and offices? What about residential? Have you looked at residential?
Yeah, so we've done studies with Bristol in schools and on the streets as well. We just find, with some of the public contracts, it does take quite a while to get stuff happening. So that's why we've more gravitated toward the industry side. But we're always having discussions with Bristol Uni, and they always want to get stuff off the ground in terms of that. Yeah. Sorry?
You mentioned, you don't know what's causing the air.
So it can be many factors. I mean, if you've got a big open site like the Redcar site, you can't. It's very probabilistic. You don't necessarily know where all the pollution is coming from, because it might not all be coming from the site itself. So it's about finding what things you can about what. So you need to be able to track what is happening on the site, so you can say this thing is causing that bit of pollution, and then it allows you to see, okay, well then everything else is from the environment. So it's, if you see what I'm saying, you need more sensors to be able to distinguish what's the site's causing and what's just the environment. Sorry?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Too loud now. You sense the air quality yourself, really, and as you said, it's all about collecting that data, because some places the air's a lot better than others, and you combat that. But what's the solution afterwards? Do you have to wear a mask, or what do you do?
Yeah, well, it's about giving the managers, the people who make the policies, as much information as possible, and then ultimately the decision is theirs. They have to decide, okay, this person has been exposed too much, he should work in a different area, or these people need to wear PPE, and it's about giving them the tools to make the right decisions ultimately. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Paddy.
Okay.
And any more questions for Paddy, we'll grab maybe the beer and pizza afterwards. So next up we have Hugh. Hugh from Watchkeeper. Watchkeeper are all about using geospatial data and tech to map client assets, employees, supply chains, etc., alongside third-party data feeds. So without further ado, over to you.
Okay, so I'll see if this works, and we go on to ours. Nope. Can we switch on to the... Hold on. Sorry, I bought my own laptop. I'm difficult. It's mainly because we're going to be doing, maybe showing you a bit of a presentation, and the software we're using is quite powerful, and usually when I do these presentations, I don't trust what they necessarily have on lecterns. So my name's Hugh Farquhar. I'm the CEO of Watchkeeper. We're a data integration platform that leverages location intelligence to visualize, track, and protect critical operations for major corporations. Effectively, what we're doing is we're looking to take IoT sensors and risk data into one platform and be able to alert them to natural disasters, public disorder incidents, public health issues, and accidents that might impact their operations or the life safety of their staff. So So just to give you a little idea, this is 2018, but 2019 was kind of fairly similar. Not every day is business as usual for major organizations. There are multiple events which happen on a daily basis around the world that could impact either an organization directly or indirectly through their supply chains. So here it can be anything from demonstrations in Venezuela, which could stop some oil kind of shipments that you might kind of need, to typhoons in Asia, wildfires in California's, flooding, which we've seen both here in the UK, but obviously happens in kind of maybe less developed countries that are maybe making some of your tech, to even the yellow vest protests in France, which can cause significant losses for retail operations. And just to put this in some context, at the end of 2018, I finished 10 years working for Citibank. Citibank is an organization which has 330,000 people that work for it. That's the size of Iceland's population, just to put it in context, with over 5,000 locations globally. So for Citibank, we actually kind of dealt with over 850 physical security incidents that had the potential to impact our operations in 2018 alone. So that puts it in some sort of context, 2 to 3 incidents per day that we're having to monitor, respond to make sure that our employees are safe, our business operations aren't impacted, or our clients that we might be doing cash transaction services or whatever it was for are not kind of impacted either. This clicker is slow. So effectively, it's not if, but when one of these natural disasters, violent incidents, or public health initiatives are going to impact your operations. But it's not just large organizations like Citibank. It is any organization which has operations around the world or has a supply chain which is fed from different areas of the globe. And by the way, none of these companies are in the Fortune kind of the top 500. So even though they're massive brands that we all know, they are kind of companies which are seen as maybe a little smaller compared to some of the kind of top Fortune 500 ones. So all of these will have thousands of employees, maybe retail branches on the high street. I think Starbucks, along with McDonald's, are always the ones that get their windows smashed first in especially in the Middle East or in kind of African countries when protest breaks out. Citibank had the same issue in Greece when the financial crash happened. They didn't really like capitalist American banks. So again, there's a range of different threats which could impact the operations of these. The problem is at the moment is that these organizations have all of the data within either internally or they receive it from external risk partners. So for instance, you'll have human resources, which will look after all of your employee information. Your travel department will look after all your travel data. Facilities management will know where all your buildings are. But all of that information is sitting in different departments and siloed on different systems. So for me as a kind of corporate security manager working in a global security operations center, it would take me about 2 hours to not only request this information in different departments, receive it back in spreadsheet form, then have to crunch through that data to identify who might be in the affected area and then reach out to those people. But I would then have to look at multiple different risk vendor sources to identify what they're saying on the event. So it might be Data Miner. So Data Miner is a social media aggregator for high impact events. They monitor the whole of the Twitter fire hose. We as consumers only see about 10% of Twitter. They monitor the whole fire hose and run their algorithms so that they can pick high impact events that are occurring as fast as possible. On average, they're about 20 minutes to 2 hours ahead of news reporting, and they're now actually beginning to start serving people like CNN and BBC and Sky News for exactly that reason. So ultimately, it's a fragmented process at the moment, and ultimately the incident response is delayed, which can be millions of dollars in lost revenues because of business disruption, or it can actually put your staff in harm's way, the life safety of staff. So for instance, one of the last things I dealt with at Citibank was a terrorist attack against a hotel complex in Nairobi, Kenya. We found out that we had an employee actually staying in that hotel at the time. So again, our response to giving him some advice on what to do in that situation, and then being able to use our local country security manager to coordinate with the security forces on the ground to say, we have James in room kind of 418, is absolutely vital to potentially saving that employee's life and him not making a decision that ends up in an injury or death. And remember, all of these organizations have a duty of care to their employees as well. Do it the old-fashioned way. So ultimately, what we are looking to do is we look to bring all of this into one single platform, and we use mapping to do that. So effectively, we take all your internal systems, those HR feeds, those travel feeds, those facilities, and we map them all on the map. We can also take live feeds in from your access control. So let's say there's an issue that happens outside of this building, right? There's a suspicious car that's parked outside. There will be a number of people that are registered to work in this building, but it is now 7 o'clock, and most of those people won't be there. But if they had an access control system on the front, on the turnstiles, for instance, at the front, we'd be able to understand who's badged in. So therefore, we could triage who we need to make sure are safe and okay before just running through a whole list of maybe 2,000 people in this building. And again, to put that in context, Citibank's location in New York, 12,000 people work in that building. So to be able to triage very quickly to find out who might actually be there is absolutely critical. We can also take CCTV feeds in, so we can plug in all of their CCTV cameras if they're IP-connected systems, and you can click into a building and actually look at the CCTV cameras. We do this as well for the risk feeds, so we can take in traffic cameras. There are 52,000 traffic cameras around the world that you can actually get access to. And so if there's an event that happens in, let's say, London Bridge, you can use the local traffic cameras from TfL, which has an open API, to actually maybe get eyes on the incident and understand how serious it is, or where the cordons from the kind of police are being kind of put in place. But ultimately, we bring all of those IoT sensors and vendor risk feeds and start mapping it in proximity. We then kind of allow the customer or the client to define their risk thresholds. So for instance, if I'm Apple and I have my offices in California and I have manufacturing plants in Indonesia, 2 earthquake risk zones. But in California, the building regulations are kind of fairly high when it comes to earthquake risk. So we would want to, the manager could set up a rule that says, alert me to any earthquake within 30 miles of my facility and over 7 on the Richter scale. But in Indonesia, where the building regulations aren't necessarily as high, you might want to have that alert coming in with an earthquake 100 miles from your facility and only 5 on the Richter scale. So suddenly the organization is being able to kind of get alerts and monitor the world and filter the noise out from all of the different data that's going on based on their risk thresholds. And that is an absolute game changer for the organization. They're not having to have tens of analysts or kind of watch command center staff monitoring loads of feeds constantly. Ultimately, the computer engine does it for you, and it only tells you what is likely to impact your operation, so you can filter all those noises out for those signals. And that's where you get the real-time alerts. There are surprisingly a huge amount of IoT sensors that give you real-time data. So earthquake, tsunami feeds, river sensors all around the world as well that you can plug into and take feeds and set risk thresholds off those. Hold, I'm giving up on that. So, bit dark, but this is what we did back in the summer for hurricane season. So this is Hurricane Dorian coming in. This is sped up over a 2-day period. So a couple of things that you've kind of seen there. Number one, you've got all of the imagery that we use from IBM and the storm path. Secondly, you've got all of the flood sensors, which are these round dots here, and different levels. Plus, you saw when the hurricane started coming towards the coast of Florida, everyone started panicking a little bit and going, oh, this might actually hit. So they opened a load of evacuation shelters. So we're taking a feed in from the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the US and the American Red Cross to tell where those evacuation shelters are. We're working with one of the world's largest ride-sharing company at the moment, and they actually do free rides between evacuation shelters. So they want to know when they're opening and where they're located. Also, we're working with a large travel company which wants to know where it can put all of its residents that are staying in hotels into evacuation shelters should something like that happen. You also see these yellow patches up there. The next slide actually sums this up much better, so I'll just change it on this. This is Hurricane Dorian going up the east coast. It's quite dark, but you can actually see a little bit squares lighting up on the coastline. Those are actually real-time power outages by county, so we're monitoring all of the electrical companies in the US and defining kind of where power outages are happening per utility provider. What that allows us to do is to alert the client to, you've got a manufacturing plant that is now in an area that's suffering power outages. You might want to kind of get on the phone to your backup supplier and make them start kind of making your orders, because your manufacturing facility, if it hasn't already, may lose power. And actually there was a manufacturing facility for this particular client right on that coastline that kind of suffered some power outages. Power outages on a larger scale. Pacific Gas and Electric Company in the US started cutting off power to over 3 million people earlier this year. Why? Because in 2017, a number of their power lines were blown down by high winds. They started wildfires. A number of people died because of those wildfires. They were sued. So this year, they turned around and said, we'll just turn off the power then. And therefore, when our power lines go down, they won't start any bushfires. So they were huge up through the Napa Valley in San Francisco. Actually, this ended up going all the way down, down to Santa Cruz. There were huge power outages, and again, we were monitoring them in real time and notifying clients to kind of any assets that they may have had in those areas. Australia bushfires. We were taking in live feeds from Victoria and New South Wales states on where wildfires were occurring, and then also their warnings, so their warning levels. So the polygons, which again, you can't see that well on this dark map, but the polygons there are actually the different warning levels that they've got for the areas. And so we were able to notify clients on any incidents that went above watch and act. And watch and act was basically start getting yourself out of the area. It then went to emergency, which was it's too late to get out of the area. Shelter in place if you can. And there was also an evacuation kind of order that would make it mandatory to leave. So we were doing that, and obviously you saw the weather coming through there. That kind of changed. That was done towards the end, showing kind of how the weather was starting to kind of start control some of the bushfires. And then we've all just had Storm Dennis here in the UK. Storm Dennis actually started in the US. So it started in the middle of the US, in the south and the eastern parts. You can see all the kind of flood warnings across the middle and across the east coast. This area down here is actually all extreme tornado warnings. So again, we were able to alert clients to any facilities that were within those tornado warning areas. And ultimately that then ended up coming across the Atlantic to be Storm Dennis. But that is after that band of rain, which is Storm Dennis, has just left that middle America. And you can see the difference between the flood sensors, which aren't really there yet, and then after the rain's been through, you can see the amount of kind of flood sensors that suddenly came on the East Coast. So again, we're monitoring all of that in real time. So what is this important, or kind of what does this kind of show our kind of clients? Well, ultimately, that by combining multiple different data sets into one common operating picture allows risk events to be better contextualized. If you look at one data provider, you're getting one view of a situation. But by combining them all together, you're getting a completely different picture. So for instance, if I can set up the rules which are based on alert me if my facility is within a high risk, flood risk zone. IBM is forecasting more than 4 inches of rain in the next 24 hours, and the flood sensor near that building is already at flood action mode. That is 3 things combined, which can now give me a much better sense of whether I'm going to be impacted. And I can start kind of focusing on that facility rather than maybe kind of all of the others that will also experience the high levels of rain or might be in the kind of high flood zones, but that's the critical one. So again, it's about using the data or different data sets to contextualize the risk better for the user to allow them to kind of focus on what's going on. So a unified critical event management platform runs those bespoke business rules to filter out that noise. It also allows us to those organizations to respond much faster. We talked about duty of care, but there is also that kind of business operations standpoint. We were speaking to one pharmaceutical company that makes 90% of their drugs in Japan. So when an earthquake happens in Japan, they need to know about it as quickly as possible. Why? Because when they go to their backup supplier, that's also the backup supplier for all of the other major pharmaceutical companies. And if they don't get there first, then the order book of that backup supplier gets full, and suddenly that company's at risk of not being able to fulfill its orders. So actually, if you can be first to know information, it can act as a significant competitive advantage over your rivals. And finally, because we're Tech Wednesday, what are we using as the technology stack? So all services, I love when you get onto the technology thing, the screen goes blank and the tech fails. There it is. All services are containerized into Docker containers. We use Kubernetes for container orchestration. Helm is used for packaging and deployment. And we have a cloud agnostic architecture. So we operate over AWS, IBM, Google Cloud, whatever it might be. And this is because we actually deploy our system sometimes on-premise behind the client's own firewall because we are dealing with PII and other sensitive data. And the new platform, which we've just raised £500,000 to develop, will be made up of 3 services. On the API front, we're using TypeScript, Nest.js, and Swagger. On the front end, we got TypeScript, React.js, Redux, and Mapbox will be our new mapping engine. Alerting in the background, we use TypeScript, and then these services are backed by Postgres SQL, PostGIS databases, and Redis. I've got my CTO sat in the crowd, so if you ask me tech questions, I'm deflecting immediately because I've just read that, as you can tell. So that's us. Thank you very much. Take any questions.
So over to the floor. Any questions at the back there?
Yep.
All right, quick question. Why Mapbox and not Google Maps?
Google Maps is, so Mapbox is more of an open map architecture. It allows you to do a lot more. Google also, so I built one of these platforms in-house at Citibank, and we immediately went to Google. And when we asked the question, will you sign a document that says you will not monitor or track anything that we place onto the map? They refuse to sign that document. So there's a little bit of Google that is just Google of you don't get anything for free. And so Mapbox, we can bring that whole kind of map architecture on our side, secure it, and use it that way. There's also there's a lot more customization you can do on the base maps around with color and different things, which we're exploring at the moment.
Any more?
Yep.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, does your services also impact charities, for example?
Yeah, massively. So charities, aid agencies, government organizations. So some of the aid agencies, for instance, work in some of the most dangerous parts of the world, South Sudan being a classic example. We presented the other day at the Geospatial Intelligence Conference for National Security, and had some conversations with not only defense contractors that do a lot of work with those aid agencies and charities on protecting their personnel and assets within those countries, but also some aid agencies as well. So it's a bit like news organizations are the same. So usually when most organizations are pulling people out, aid agencies or news organizations are actually deploying people in country. So again, at Citibank, we evacuated people out of Egypt during the Arab Spring, but at the same time, you had CNN, Sky News, NBC News, and aid agencies going in there, deploying people to help. And so, those people are excellent clients for us, so to speak. Yep.
One more question. Thanks.
If you keep it quick, because the pizza's here and my tummy's rumbling.
So you mentioned IoT, which is quite a new thing, and it's growing quite rapidly as well. And it's like you're doing something, on a more of a global scale. Have you looked at this on a more kind of, for risks faced for, within cities, smaller scale risks, or is it just all, because IoT is obviously going to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already had discussions with the Met Police's counter-terrorism arm. So the Met Police in Blackheath have a huge command and control centre. They very kindly invited me down the day after the first London Bridge incident to see the whole room set up and how they operate as teams between the ambulance, the firearms units, the normal Met Police, the ambulance services, etc. All of those vehicles which are operating under law enforcement or emergency service have GPS transponders on them, right? So we can start tracking vehicles, and for an incident commander or someone who sits within the gold team of the crisis management teams for government, we can set up rules that say, if there are more than 2 police cars, 1 firearms unit, and let's say more than 2 ambulances within 500 meters of each other, that kind of tells me that something major is going on that incident, so alert me to it. So there's lots of things we can do. Effectively, anything which is connected to the internet, or any data set that even has a slight geotag in it, and that can just be the word Heathrow, the Shard, the Hilton in Birmingham. We can plot it, map it, display it, track it.
Yeah, which is fascinating, isn't it? It's just going to grow and grow.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much, Hugh. We'll take more questions from Peter. Okay, last but not least, we welcome Martin to the floor. Martin's on our first Geovation Scotland cohort and is head of a company called Folarity, and they're all about, the mission is to increase forest cover in the UK.
Yes.
And we're trying to get onto that first slide, if we could just get some help there.
I'm just going to fill this quick. Just to let everybody know, if you have parked in our car park this evening, our security has changed. So you need to pay for your parking at reception. So if you're used to paying for your parking over in the car park, please don't get there because you will have to come all the way back. So if you have parked in the Faraday Basement car park, please pay before you leave the building. That was a nice little filler.
Thanks. Cool. Is this working okay? Cool. So we're Folarity, and we're on a mission to increase the forest cover of the UK. Bit background about myself. I'm Martin Warne, the founder of Folarity. So I originally went to Southampton University and got a computer science degree. I then moved to London and set up a social enterprise called Donation that's focused on environmental behaviour change. And then I went back to uni at Bangor University and got an environmental forestry degree. So Folarity is me trying to smush those 2 degrees together and justify why I did it. So why do we need to worry about the forest cover of the UK? The government's own advisors say we need to plant 1.5 billion trees by 2050 to tackle climate change. That's 50 million a year. For reference, at the moment, we're planting about 13,000 hectares. We need to be planting 30 to 50,000 to hit this goal. You've probably seen in the last election campaign, there's good news. Everyone was talking about trees. And the Tories, who we've ended up with, have said they're going to plant 30,000 hectares per year. So there's money coming in. The issue is that the system's not ready for this money. Forest managers are already overworked, and there's a lack of universities in the UK producing the next generation to help them. At the same time, the UK is the second biggest net importer of timber after China. This means that we're importing a ton of timber that could have infections on it, and at the same time, we're importing a load of living plants in as well. This is why we get things like ash dieback disease, which is due to kill 80 million trees over the next couple of decades. So we've come up with Forest Planner to help address some of these issues. We've worked in collaboration with forest managers to make sure it fits into their workflow rather than forcing them to adopt a whole new methodology. For background, forest managers spend about 50% of their time in the office and 50% out in the woodlands. They take a range of notes. This is going to be on paper notebooks to Microsoft Word to GIS, so their data is in a lot of different places. They're going to be managing 30 to 50 woodlands and have multiple contractors at each woodland. On top of this, if they're doing a certified woodland, which 44% of the UK woodlands are, they're going to have to generate a management plan every 5 years. So we've taken this and produced the first version of Forest Planner. It's built around the management plans that I just mentioned, the separate ones for England and Scotland, and Wales is about to come up with its own one, and contractor management, because that's a large time sink. Finally, it combines their textual and their spatial data into one place to make it easier to do large-scale analysis of their woodlands. So, because it's taken me up, how does this work? I was going to point, but it's a giant screen. So on the far right, you can see there's an API server. This is powered by GraphQL that I'll break down in a minute. This powers the web apps and the mobile apps, meaning they're equal class citizens. And then finally, the public pages sit separately. Originally, the public pages, the web app, and the API server were all the same Django system. But this was making updates hard to do, so we've split them all out. So just quickly on the front pages, so these are powered by React and Material UI. This is what we're using for the web application. So this means there's less context switching, and we can reuse bits of code. We then pull in the content through Prismic, which is a headless CMS, and deploy to Netlify. That all goes through Gatsby. So Gatsby takes this JavaScript code and it converts it to plain HTML and CSS. This means you don't have to worry about SEO, with the JavaScript potentially not being read by crawlers, and you get quicker loading and browser compatibility becomes less of an issue. The API server is, the main core of it is Django. That's being used because that's what I've used, so it's quicker to deploy the thing. But it's got great user authentication, and it's also got brilliant Postgres integration, which I'll talk about in a minute. Finally, it's got Graphene, which is a library that can really easily produce a GraphQL endpoint. So GeoJSON, for you that haven't come into contact before, it's just built on top of JSON. It's a specification about how you store spatial data that everyone has agreed on and said, this is how we're going to send it. So here we're just saying we want a polygon with these coordinates, and we're just going to name it Forest Outline. And then on the right, you can see some post-GIS code. So what we're doing here is where it says GeoJSON on the right, it's just this code on the left. We're pulling it, we're turning it into a geometry, we're changing the coordinate system, and then we're producing an area from it. So instead of having to store lots of different data, we're just working in GeoJSON the entire time. And the other bit is GraphQL. So some of you before might have used REST APIs. GraphQL was something that came out of Facebook, and they use it for Facebook and Instagram. And what it means is I can do queries like on the left, where I'm saying, I care about the forest with ID 2, I want its name, I want its area. And you can see on the right, in the same structure, it's giving me that return data. But it also means I can customize this. So this time I now want to care about the compartments inside that forest. So again, it's just returned a list. This means instead of having multiple endpoints, where I have to pick certain ones and program all these different endpoints, or I return a ton of data that I don't care about, which is bad when you're up at the middle of a hill with a poor mobile phone signal, I can just ask explicitly for what I want in this particular instance. I will say, so these are examples of queries. There's also mutations if you want to do create, update, and delete operations. It's not a silver bullet versus REST API. It struggles with things like file uploads, and you can potentially create a lot of database hits. So I'm happy to talk about that earlier. When we get to the web app, as I mentioned, it's React and it's Material UI. Material UI, if any of you have used Foundation or Bootstrap before, it's kind of similar. You're going to get a very samey-looking application to everyone else, but it's really quick to get off the ground up and running. Mapbox, I'm really happy someone else has dealt with that question about why Mapbox. But from our point of view, as I said, we've using GeoJSON everywhere, and Mapbox takes that straight in and renders it. So it means we don't have to convert anything. And then finally, Apollo is just the front-end JavaScript library that can read from Graphene and do some really powerful caching. Although our flag, if you're going to delete lots of stuff, it kind of trips over itself at that point. But they are apparently going to fix that soon. And then, yeah, onto the mobile apps. So I would love to have fully native ones with Swift and Kotlin or whatever Android's using these days, but it's just me making this. So React Native means we get to reuse some of the code from our web apps. while still making versions for both. The main thing to focus on with the mobile apps is that it has to have really solid offline support. So when they're in the office, it has to sync all the data to the platform, so when they're out in the field without mobile signal, they can still access the data. At the same point, when they're in the field and they want to take an image or write a text note, it has to be able to save that and then sync it as soon as you get signal back. Finally, data sources. So at the moment, all I've said is they're going to input a load of data. Obviously, no one actually likes to input a lot of data, so how are we going to help with that? We're using the OS Data Hub, which, if people don't know, is the new Ordnance Survey structure of how you can get some data. So in this instance, it works really well for us because we know the outline of a forest. So we can say, we care about this area, give us all the rivers in this area, and it returns it using GeoJSON. So again, we can just plug that straight into Mapbox and display it. The government data, so we're interested in sites of special scientific interest, or SSSIs, and we're also interested in ancient monuments because there's various restrictions about what you can and can't do when it comes to planting near them. They are really annoying because all of the devolved governments have different data sets in different formats. So we're currently getting all of them, compiling them, and putting them into PostGIS and hopefully a coherent structure. And then finally, forest research, as you might have guessed, likes forestry data. So we've got a meeting with them set up to see what part of their data we can integrate and how that'll work going forward. But the next step is the stuff that I get really excited about. So first of all, we've got smart devices. So these are a pair of digital calipers. So you put them around a tree and it says it's this wide circumference and it can kind of predict the timber overall from this tree. So at the moment that'll do it, it will sync it to your phone and then your phone will make an Excel spreadsheet, which is great, but then you've got your data in yet another place that's not helpful to you. So we want to integrate them straight into the platform. LiDAR is, you can get it from drones and satellites. It produces a 3D map, and they've also got drones flying below the canopy now, so you can generate LiDAR from that as well. This, again, lets you estimate a large timber area in one go. This is useful because we're seeing more and more investment as well from pension providers, especially up in Scotland, so them knowing how much money they're sitting on is a very useful tool. Computer vision is great because we can tell if a tree is diseased before the best trained forester possibly can. By using different light spectrums, you can see minute changes in the color of the leaves, and that can alert you to diseased trees. This means you can cut them down earlier and not infect the rest of the forest. And finally, modeling. So once we've got all these smart data sets, we can start to do more intelligent things and predict what's going to happen. We're also interested in doing deer and squirrel simulations. So squirrels, grey squirrels, do £10 million worth of damage every year to trees in the UK, and deer's a much, much bigger problem. And finally, what are we looking for? So we're looking for testers, ideally forest managers, but if you're super keen to pretend you're a forest manager and want to try the system, feel free to come talk to me, we can see what we do. And also partners, so the things I talked about on the previous slide, if you or someone you know has any experience in them, please let us know. My email and Twitter handle on the bottom. For some reason, I didn't put the website address, but it's forestplanner.com if you want to go see it. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Martin. Any questions? I know I'm between pizza time and beer now, so yeah, there we are. So just final thank you to the four companies, and without, we'll call it a day there. And thanks for all for listening. If you want to hear more about Geovation, we're at the back there on a table and encouraging people to come and chat to us, guys in the yellow T-shirts. And beyond that, thanks a lot, Stephanie, once again for having us.
No, thank
Cheers.
you. I'm just going to quickly wrap up. So lots of thank yous without sounding like the Brits last night. I'm going to literally quickly run through these. So round of applause, please, for Ravi for thinking about us, not just the estate agents. To Paddy and to Guy, who obviously tag team. Obviously, a lot of people in the room who are local know a lot about the Brum Breathes campaign that's going on right now. So we've got our clean air solution going on in September, so we're in the run up to that, so really hot topic. To Hugh for making me feel like I'm the most secure person in this building right now, so single-handedly thank you for that. And to Martin at the end there for keeping us green, and that's what we all need. So one final thank you to Luke for hosting for this evening and for saving you all from hearing my voice throughout. Unfortunately, we're back in March and Luke's going to be back up to London. So please do join us in March. We've got a really, really exciting announcement to make about Tech Wednesday. So I'm super keen to let you guys know, but I'm sworn to secrecy right now. But thank you to you guys ever so much. Remember to pay for your parking, and we'll see you in March. Thank you.